Hey, what's up everybody? Kellen here from Start Your Systems, and welcome back to another edition of MX Simulator official track gameplays, where today we're playing round number 7 of the 2019 SX series from Arlington, and gonna give this track a little bit of a spin-a-roonies today. Try to bust out some of the lines that were being not only ran in sim, but that maybe ran in real life, and kind of talk about some thoughts and opinions going into this weekend on this track. So, Arlington, Dallas, whatever you want to call it, usually a very, for lack of a better word, like dry track. The soil in Arlington and Dallas has like a very, I don't want to say like it's a hard base, but like it has like a dry base that solidifies, so I guess hard is the right word, but usually you see Dallas turn into like kind of blue groovy tracks. They've been pretty good in recent years about keeping the moisture in the track though, so that it doesn't really stay like that, and instead we get tracks that have pretty loose dirt in the berms, and maybe the rhythm lanes will get a little bit more blue grooved. But if you ever go back and watch like a race from like either the mid to early 2000s or even in the 90s when they would race in Dallas, back when it was at Cowboy Stadium in Irving, Texas, it was absolutely insane how dry those tracks would get back then. It looked like a race in California, quite honestly. So it's very well known for its hard packed dirt, and I don't feel like we're going to see anything different from that this weekend. Now, it was raining in Dallas this past weekend, I believe, so they maybe had brought the dirt in when it was raining, but I think it's going to have plenty of time to dry before then and harden up. However, in MX Simulator, they did a road settings for the Wednesday night pro race that I feel like contradicted that whole theory of hard dirt in Dallas, where they ran a road a little bit higher than usual, and then the track actually eroded, not like gnarly, but like pretty deep for what would be like considered a hard pack track. Like, I would definitely put Dallas closer to like Glendale in terms of how the dirt like solidifies and how the ruts stack up in real life. But it almost seems like it broke down more like a St. Louis or Detroit in sim. So I'm kind of jumping in between that. I ran a road on one today. Like, if I wanted it to be like true Dallas, I probably would have ran like half, or maybe even not ran a road at all, because it's normally hard packed. But trying to go in between like the two extremes of what Dallas could be and just run a road on one. So you'll see lines develop here and there, but it really isn't going to be too crazy. You can kind of already see them coming out of that corner there. You maybe will see them coming into this corner a few times, but I don't envision it breaking down terribly so. And we're going to have a grand old time playing this track today. So the Race Factory Gaming guys did a pretty good job, I feel, of replicating this track this week with what they had. I feel that the layout of the track this week is kind of boring and repetitive, unfortunately. That's just how cookie cutter these tracks are these days, though, is that like this track was very, very similar to, let's see if I get this line, and then quad. I'm gonna be short, damn. The entire layout really is very similar to Glendale as well earlier this year. The only difference is obviously the stadium size. AT&T Stadium, which is where this race will be held, is smaller than, I guess it's called like whatever it is, US Bank Stadium now or something like that in Glendale. It used to be University of Phoenix Stadium. But because they can take the actual field entirely out of the stadium in Glendale, and that area that they take the field out of is left open, they have extended lanes that they can put the track into. So really this layout is almost Glendale, but a little bit shorter. And I think you'll see a pretty similar brand of racing to what we saw at Glendale on this Saturday. So I mean, if we're going off of that, then you have to imagine someone like Baggett's going to do well this weekend, but obviously his big crash past weekend wasn't ideal for going into this weekend strong. I think he's probably going to be a little bit sore and maybe injured from last weekend's crash. All right, let's see if I can get, I'm going too long. I want to get this quad into this corner. Baggett did well at Glendale. Roczen led for a long time, but Anderson took him out. Anderson obviously not going to be here because he's hurt. And I feel as though Tomac, for whatever reason it may be, is less comfortable on dry tracks this year. Well, not like dry versus like wet. I mean dry as in like hard packed versus like moisture in the dirt and ruts developing. I think Minneapolis was maybe expected to be a little bit more like loose than it ended up being, and while ruts did develop, it didn't get super rutted out and gnarly, which is I think something Tomac's quite good at, and so that maybe took them all aback when it came to setup by the time that they got, you know, the race going and the moisture had settled into the dirt well enough that it actually made a pretty good, in terms of dirt, racetrack. That's why Tomac, I don't think, rode as well as he could last weekend. Maybe setup was off, obviously he got a bad start, so that didn't help, but I think on a normal day, Tomac goes through the field a little bit easier than he did, and I would have to believe that they maybe just got it wrong with setup there. In terms of dry races, though, Tomac hasn't been all that good at them this year. Glendale, for example, he didn't get a great start, but also he didn't do very well at that round. He was still obviously dealing on some sense with his back injury that he had during the offseason, so maybe we can kind of write that off. But historically speaking, Tomac hasn't been fantastically good on slick, dry tracks, and depending on how the track breaks down this weekend, I think could really determine whether or not Tomac can win this weekend, because I think we're all obviously kind of waiting for Tomac to start more or less hitting his stride and not only running up at the front with everybody, but getting starts and taking, you know, semi-easy race victories like he did in San Diego. But that was a mutter, so you kind of have to write that one off. Like, okay, was it a fluke? Probably not, but so far that's the only sample size we have out of Tomac. Like, yeah, he won the final round of the Triple Crown at Anaheim 2, but he got a start. So at any point when he does not get the start and is with those guys at the beginning, they have found ways to beat him. And I think a start is going to be quite big on this track. There's a lot of 90s once again, a few 180s. The track itself is kind of like the first couple corners at least, very similar to Minneapolis. Swooping left-hand turn into a rhythm lane, left-hander across the start that's like a wall jump slash, you know, last week was a Dragon's Back, and then a U-turn, come back across the start, 90-degree corner. I mean, it's just a very, like I said, similar layout in general, with maybe some themes from Glendale mixed in. So I honestly, this weekend, I have Roczen winning. He has got to break through and win one of these sooner rather than later. This will be his first time racing Arlington since 2016, if you can believe that. That's crazy, but I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. This is the first time Kenny's made it past the 6th round of the series since 2016 as well. So he's I think gonna start getting into this groove sooner or later, like we expect out of Tomac, where, I mean, Roczen at the end of 2016, when he was kind of going toe-to-toe with Dungey for the championship, but Dungey had already had a pretty well-established gap by then. Roczen was beating Dungey more later in the season than he was at the beginning of the season, so I think if he can just make it through like the beginning of the season as he has, and we start getting to these East Coast rounds, you're going to see a fire light up in Roczen, and I do believe that it could start this weekend, which is why I would have Roczen as a race victory at Arlington. Now, obviously, Webb, 3 wins coming in, you would think that he could obviously win this one as well. Marvin could win, Tomac could win, a lot of guys could win, but only one of them can, and I just think that at some point, Kenny's got to break through for one of these. He's been so close, he has a points lead again, he's probably feeling pretty good about where he is in the championship given his last couple of years and how they've gone. Kenny has absolutely never had the red plate this late in a Supercross season. He's had it a few times before. Obviously, he had it when he won the opener in 2014. He had it when he won the opener in 2015, but never made it past. I think round 4 was the latest he'd ever had the red plate in Supercross before. So, you know, there's a lot of things going in his favor. I think there's some people kind of riding Roczen off because he hasn't won a race yet and he's been up there, and that you maybe discount that as like everybody else has just had the bad luck or the bad race that gives Roczen the red plate at this point. But I mean, he's been there when they haven't, and that wins championships. We've seen that work with Anderson, we've seen that work with Dungey, we've seen that work with Chad Reed, we've seen that work with a lot of people before. And Roczen, I think, is using that as an advantage and a strategy to get himself deeper into the season by taking his time and not taking unnecessary risks. He could have forced the issue with Joey last weekend. He didn't. He waited for Joey to make the mistakes and then got around him and then settled for second. Still good points. Only lost 3 to Cooper. still has the points lead. You know, things like that are moves that keep you going later in the season and don't crash you out early in the season like Roczen has had happen to him so many times before. Now, Eli, I think, is going to be the biggest competition to my Roczen pick this weekend, but he needs to get a start. I think if he can start with Roczen, he could beat him, but there's no more of this like Tomac is going to start 10th and walk through the field and pass everybody. The field is too close right now. Everybody's too comfortable. Nobody's got any like nagging injuries or any weird thing like that. Obviously, Webb may be the clearest example of this, in that like Webb is the best he's ever like looked and felt, and he is just every week getting good starts, running up front and doing what he has to do to be in this championship hunt. Same goes for Roczen. Even when Muscan didn't get that great of a start this past week, he still found himself up front. So it's going to take Tomac figuring out his starts to really, you know, get his mojo back, I think. When he doesn't get the starts and he has to settle in with everybody, that's when you see the, you know, the bad part of Eli Tomac, the sort of shell of himself that we all know. There's an Eli Tomac that can rip through the field and win races by 25 seconds in there, but for some reason the other Eli Tomac still exists every now and then, and he just cruises around and looks like a 6th place guy, and you're so confused by it because he could win by 25 seconds one week and be that 6th place guy the next week. Really, we have never had something quite like Tomac, because some people do compare him to Stewart about how like it was seriously crash or win, but now Tomac is sort of like bad start or win, or like mediocre ride or win. I mean, he's won in the last 2 years before this, he'd won half the races, so he has to still be the favorite moving forward, being this close in the championship, but he's got to get those starts figured out. And I saw a couple people comment on the video and say that, you know, Dino blocked him and this, that, and the other thing off the gate, but Tomac came into the first corner almost side by side with Marvin, came out of the corner right behind Marvin, and somehow they ended up 10 spots, but you know, between each other at the end of the first lap. That's like kind of racecraft. Like, you kind of have to be a little bit better through those first rhythm lanes. If you go back and watch McGrath or even Ricky, when they would not get good starts, the moves that they could make to get to the front and go from a 12th place start to be in 4th by the end of the first lap was incredible. They knew how to read what was going on in front of them, what the riders in front of them were going to do, so that they could make some moves that would get them higher up in the running order quicker. Because at the very least, if Tomac had just like taken a few more chances in some spots that he probably could have, and not lost 5 spots and ended up coming across the line at the end of the first lap in like 12th or even 11th, I don't think he gets stuck behind many people last week, and probably ends up getting to Brayton before the end, and maybe is, you know, only one off the championship lead or whatever. He would have been, I guess, maybe tied for the championship at that point. And going back again to Dungey, that was the thing that always killed everybody about Dungey, is that he would, you know, do decent enough in a heat race to get one of the first 5 inside gates, and it was just like every week you could expect it that he would not get the jump off the gate, but he would be, you know, in the front half of the people going into the first corner, but he'd break well before everybody else, and when everybody drifted wide, he'd sneak down the inside and end up at the very least like 5th, but almost always 1st or 2nd. And like, I almost feel that that's something Tomac needs to take a page out of the book from. Like, if he wins the heat, just pick one of the first 5 inside gates, like automatically, and just cruise down the inside. Get a bad jump if you have to, but cruise down the inside, wait for the chaos to happen, and come out peachy keen inside of the top 10. I mean, I feel like that's a better strategy than what has happened, which is like pick the gate that may end up with the whole shot, but if you get pinched off, you're going to end up in the back half of the field and having to scramble on the first couple laps. I mean, you know, they pick Gates for a reason. I'm just saying some of the reasons why I think he could maybe fix the problem with his bad starts without necessarily having to, quote, fix the problem. You know, just utilize his optimal gate picks in the qualifyings and, you know, eventually in the main events to get half-decent starts that lead to good race results. And, yeah, fix the starts. That's all I see that's wrong with Tomac is the starts. That's why I have to talk about it so much. I feel like I'm Jeff Emig out here, keys to the race. But yeah, I have to imagine it's those four. Now that we're moving into the kind of East Coast swing, really getting things going, second round of the East swing, essentially. I mean, I think the Triple Crown is going to be the only like real thing that breaks up the momentum here between our front four of just, you know, them being the guys week in and week out. So I got Roczen in the 450 class, and let's move into the 250 class real quick for some discussion here before I wrap up this video. It's like Faulkner and Jordan Smith seem to be like the two guys that obviously they went 1-2 last week, but they have the speed and they have like the knowledge about how to do this. I think Sexton is probably the closest to figuring it out how to get into that mix. Like, yeah, Justin Cooper was fastest qualifier and he ended up on the podium, but I think in terms of like he's got enough experience to know what it takes to run up front, and then, you know, like has had a little bit more time under his belt than Justin Cooper. I think Chase Sexton is probably the next on the list behind Smith and Faulkner. In terms of like, if you want to do a power rankings thing going into this weekend, I would say it's like Smith, Faulkner, or Faulkner, Smith, and then Sexton, and then probably Justin Cooper, and then a whole myriad of other things going on behind them. Like, I don't know, do you put Amart there? Do you put, like, does Davalos figure it out and get back into the mix again? Because Davalos had a very peculiar week, I feel, at Minneapolis. Like, it was not the old Davalos that comes out swinging and does, you know, strong lap times in practice and things like that. It was kind of just like a regular Marty all day long, never looked comfortable. Obviously got taken out in the main, but somehow I tend to believe that Davalos is going to come out this weekend and still be the same old Marty that we know from before, where he's quick, he is able to run some ridiculous speeds in qualifying practice, and really I think he's going to be just fine this weekend. I don't know why I have this weird sensation about how Marty's going to do, but that to me was not the Davalos we know last weekend, and I think he's going to get it fixed this weekend. So I got Davalos probably ending up in the top 5, maybe contending for a podium this week. But if I had to pick a winner, I'm going to say Jordan Smith, just to be different, because I do tend to believe this is going to be another Faulkner track where he's, you know, been pretty good with starts through the ones that we've seen so far, and he was already a good starter anyway. And then it's pretty rhythmic. Faulkner's a, you know, pretty smooth guy when it comes to like timing rhythm sections and staying low. I'd say like Smith's forte is more like bulldogging corners and things like that. And I mean, I guess both of them have things that they could feel are their strengths going into this weekend, but I feel like it's a toss-up between the two of them, because Smith to go through the whole tire change on the line, have his heart in his mouth, crash at one point, and still finish second. I just don't feel like if you take away those variables this week that he's going to be A-okay and challenge for the win. So I'm going to say Jordan Smith wins this week, just to be different. Although I will say that, you know, kind of under my breath here, I just feel like it's going to be another Faulkner week. But I'm going to say Smith, and I'm going to say Kenny in the 450 class. And that is what I'm thinking about this weekend in Arlington for the upcoming round number 7 of the Monster Energy Supercross Series. So hope you guys enjoyed this video, and hope you guys are looking forward to the racing action this weekend. Racing action. I kind of like Dallas. I have relatives there, so I hope a lot of you guys that are going to Dallas also have a good time and enjoy Jerry's World. And yeah, round number 7. Have a good time, guys. Dallas, good times, dirt bikes, and we'll have a good time. Thanks for watching another video here on Start Your Systems. My name is Kellen, and I will see you guys in the next one. So long for now.